Hey guys, welcome back to the AJ Analysis channel where, do we really have to cover this game? Do we? Another mauling of Manchester United in a big game, another disappointing performance, another pathetic showing really from the players, from the manager. It was absolutely horrendous. Today we're going to break down pretty much what went wrong, and there's a lot to talk about here, so let's just get into it. So before we continue into the video, a quick shout out to today's video sponsor, JerseyFifa.com, the home of all of the greatest football kits. Whether that be the new latest releases or the old classic ones like this, Jersey FIFA has something for everyone, and now you can check it out yourself using the link in the description down below. And also make sure to use code JerseyFIFA for 10% off when you order. So we will start off with the lineup, where straight away we can see that this is a depleted Manchester United squad. Rafael Varane and Region both missing from the side. The question is, was this a fitness thing or was it a tactical thing? Erik ten Hag said before the game that it was tactical, but perhaps that was just to put a bit of confidence in his players. I'm not too sure. If it was a tactical decision, what on earth are you thinking? Because now when we look at this back four, we've got a lack of progression down the left-hand side. We've got no players in the back four which can receive in deep areas apart from Diogo Dalot. We've got nothing down the left-hand side in terms of progressing the ball forward. You know, Victor Lindelof at left back is not it. Then we've got Christian Eriksen in midfield, which to me doesn't make sense when we're talking about Manchester City are going to be, you know, aggressive, control a lot of the ball. You need some intensity to you. Eriksen doesn't bring that. Scott McTominay in the 10, I'm not necessarily mad at it, but it just didn't work. Fernandes out wide again. It's not a great start. And it had a big effect on how Manchester United played. But just quickly on the lineup, it does really make me question Erik ten Hag, and I don't want to throw him under the bus in this game too much. But he did get it horribly wrong from start to finish. And my big concern with him is we've spoken about he doesn't have his players in his squad, particularly last season. But also at the start of this season, there's been injuries. We've spoken about not having his team, so give him a bit of time. That's something that I've said. But in this game, he had Sofian Amrabat and Mason Mount both fit. His two midfield recruitments this summer. His two main signings. Mason Mount coming in for big money. Amrabat, apparently we were desperate for him all summer. The fact that he doesn't trust the two of them to play together in a big game suggests you shouldn't have signed them. And then Antony on the right-hand side cost 100 million last year. And again, you don't trust him in this game. You'd rather play Bruno Fernandes, your best creator, a mile out of position just to keep Antony out of the team. So again, concerning. Let's get into the tactical side of it though. Manchester City, as you'd expect, were able to completely dominate and control possession. And the main reason for that was because Manchester United had the wrong system. They had a lack of intensity off the ball. And, you know, Manchester City had a good setup and created a good overload, So, what's going to happen is Bernardo Silva is going to push further forward, Rodri's going to come across here, John Stones is going to step into midfield, and Manchester City, for large parts of the game, are going to create a 3-2 shape. Who would have seen that coming? Literally everyone. Manchester City created this shape, and it just completely allowed them to control the game. The reason being, Manchester United have only got 1, 2, 3, 4 players in these forward areas pressing 5 Manchester City players. Now, it's difficult to work at a disadvantage when you've got one less player in the best of situations. But when you've got players who lack intensity, like Marcus Rashford being one of those 4, but also you're playing against a side who's the most technical side probably that we've ever seen, it's certainly up there with the great Barcelona sides, it just leads to an absolute disaster. But it's also because United are kind of half trying to press. So let's say the ball goes across, Kyle Walker's going to come out here, McTominay's going to slide across onto John Stones to block this pass. So far so good. Rasmus Højlund on Ruben Dias, so far so good. Fernandes is going to go on to Rodri, so far so good. But all it takes is Walker to just step into this position here and now play the ball out to Gvardiol, and now suddenly you can step out like this. And it genuinely, you know, that sounds like I'm making it really basic. It was as easy as that because Manchester United, in terms of a tactical setup, didn't have enough players in this area. They were overloaded, meaning you've either got to sit off completely or be incredibly intense, and they didn't do either of those things. And it made it far too easy for City to step forward with the ball. Now from here, the players transitioned negatively quite poorly. We know that Marcus Rashford doesn't have the intensity coming backwards. We know that McTominay, he's something weird about him this season. And Bruno Fernandes also struggled with the fact that he's being asked to pick up several players. It just made life really difficult. From here, Manchester City then done a really good job of pulling Manchester United apart and kind of using United's man-to-man approach in midfield against them. So we've got Sofian Amrabat on Alvarez, which seems like an okay link-up or an okay matching. Eriksen on Bernardo Silva, though, is absolutely mind-boggling. Bernardo Silva is one of the best players in the world in terms of picking up different spaces on a football pitch, receiving the ball, playing on the turn, and creating chances. He's a brilliant ball carrier. He carries well under pressure. How do you stop him? You get a really intense player on him. Not Christian Eriksen. I don't think Eriksen... I don't want to criticise Eriksen too much because I think, again, like we've seen a few times recently, he was put into a situation where he was always going to fail. Even swapping Amrabat and Eriksen around would have been something. That could have helped. But it just didn't, and it looked awful. In terms of actually stopping City from central progression in the first half, I actually thought United done an okay job. I thought United done a decent job of being compact. But the second the ball came down this side, Bernardo Silva's constantly going to move into this position. Jack Grealish moved much more central than what we would typically see, so Pep Guardiola deserves a lot of credit for noticing this weakness in the United system. But he's going to drag Dalot inside, and Bernardo Silva now picks the ball up in this position. Bruno Fernandes has to do more to get back, but also Christian Eriksen has now got a decision to make. He's supposed to be man-marking Bernardo Silva, but if he does that, he's leaving so much space in behind him, which Rodri can step into, which John Stones can step into. By the way, John Stones is one of the best players in the world, and he just proved it again with that performance. Absolutely incredible. But you've got Haaland can drop into these areas, Julian Alvarez can come inside. It created a real problem. The problem on the flip side, though, is that if Eriksen stays deeper and kind of picks up his man in the middle, Bernardo Silva has so much room to carry the ball forward. Again, from a tactical point of view, it's all wrong from United. Now, as a result of these kind of tactical situations we were seeing in the game, Manchester City really had control in that first half. They completely dominated the ball and hurt United. However, United were just about hanging on and had a big threat on the counter-attack, particularly in the first 20 minutes. United's XG and things like that looked quite low, but that's because the final pass and the shot selection wasn't right. There was actually some really good opportunities in transition. And again, in central areas, I did just feel that United were fairly compact. I thought in the central areas, United were doing okay. The main threat, like I said already, was Grealish moving inside, Bernardo Silva kind of creating this 2 versus 1 with Dalot, Eriksen getting stuck, which then means you can either play to the byline, get the ball to Haaland in the middle. But it gets worse in the second half. And that's really concerning because it gets worse because of a Ten Hag change. Now, you've struggled in the first half. Tactically, your setup is wrong. And you're being outplayed, you're being controlled. So you want your manager at halftime to make a change which is going to impact your team in a positive way. Sofian Amrabat off, Mason Mount on. What? I cannot get my head around this. This is horrendous. It's terrible in-game management from Erik ten Hag now. I don't want to say it because I really like him as a manager. And I think he has a lot of potential at the club. But it's horrendous in-game management. Look at the structure of this midfield now. Now, granted, Mason Mount played high, McTominay dropped deeper. But surely bringing Christian Eriksen off for Mason Mount would have got more energy, more legs in the team. I actually thought Amrabat played okay in the first half from a defensive point of view. And McTominay did have a threat. The issue was the lack of energy down this side of the pitch. Why not bring Mason Mount on for Christian Eriksen? But we didn't. Amrabat comes off. Scott McTominay goes into this right central midfield position. Eriksen's now switched to a left, which helps him. It sees him have a better second half. And Mason Mount plays here. But we've still got the same main problems. We've got a back three here, which is outnumbering Rasmus Højlund. We've got... This then creates this 3-2 of Walker, Diaz, Gvardiol, Rodri and John Stones. Completely outnumbering these 4 United players. Sometimes they can pull it in like this, and, it's John Stones and Rodri creating a 2 versus 1 in this position. Sometimes it's the fullback on the other side is spare. Sometimes it's Ruben Diaz, which is spare. But there's always a spare man. City are very good technically. They pull United apart. So we haven't addressed that issue. We haven't addressed the issue down this side, because while Scott McTominay does bring a bit more physicality, he brings a bit more athleticism down this side, he doesn't bring defensive intelligence. And what I think was really clear in the second half was that this wasn't something United had worked on. This was a panicked situation because Dalot and McTominay's communication in passing men on was horrendous. Say Bernardo Silva gets the ball in this position and they're kind of standing it up like this. There were situations where they would both now come follow Bernardo Silva, but now Grealish pops up in a lot of space. Another time they would both track the run of Grealish, but now Bernardo Silva's in a lot of room. And again, it just kept opening up all day long, this ball to the back post for Erling Haaland. We saw Onana make that fantastic save, and it's an incredible save, deserves a lot of credit for it. But what's unforgivable for United is that just a few minutes later in the game, they concede from the exact same chance being recreated. This time Haaland doesn't make a mistake, puts the ball in the back of the net, giving Onana no chance. Shout out to Anana, by the way. It would have been about 5-0 without him. But tactically, it's horrendous that United haven't learned. They're not learning from mistakes. Now, what we've then also got is now we've got central problems as well, because we no longer have the defensive intelligence of Sophie and Amrabat in there. We've got Christian Eriksen and Scott McTominay, who, you know, I don't mind McTominay in a double pivot when you're trying to be defensive and counter-attack. I don't mind it. But when you're 2 goals down, you need a player to get on the ball, be progressive, make things happen, work room. Scott McTominay is not your man for that. And Christian Eriksen also, by this stage, physically is just completely done out in the game. He was struggling. The fact that he played as long as he did, again, it just seems mind-boggling to me. I don't really get what Ten Hag was going for here. After the game, he was asked about the performance, and he said, we followed the tactical plan pretty well. That's concerning. Because now in the second half, like I said, we saw City still progressing down the left-hand side, but also now through the middle as well, because there's no protection in central areas. Again, this front four is now getting played through even easier because heads are dropping, energy is running out, attitudes are poor, body language is poor. City are finding it easier and easier to come into these areas. They're getting into these advanced positions. They're now outnumbering the double pivot of United, with John Stones really being effective and just tearing United to shreds. And that's all without even talking about the quality of Phil Foden down the right-hand side and Kyle Walker getting forward around him. It was just an absolute mess. Now, in terms of analysing this game specifically, of course, there was much more going on that we could look at. But for me, those are the main points which really decided this game in City's favour. Their ability to identify a weakness in the United system and then exploit it time and time again, and just keep exploiting it. So I think that's all I've got to talk about for this particular game. But just a quick word on Erik ten Hag. There's a real concern here now. And I feel like he's got himself in a bit of a rut of... I don't know the best way to describe it. Again, like we said at the start of the video, he signed Amrabat and Mason Mount in summer. Granted, Amrabat on loan, but those were the 2 players he wanted for his midfield. The fact that he doesn't trust them to start is horrifying. To then sign Anthony for 100 million and not play him seems odd. Granted, he might be lacking sharpness, so that one's a bit more understandable. But the midfield issue I have a real concern with, especially when Mason Mount was playing quite well a few weeks back when he came back from injury. But I think what Ten Hag has got himself into now is a situation where the form was really poor at the start of the season, right? We beat Wolves, yes, but it wasn't a great performance. We beat Forest, but we went 2-0 down first. Spurs beat us. Arsenal beat us. We're seeing countless other teams beat us. I can't even be bothered to go through them all. So we've seen United outclassed in several games. What he has now decided that he needs to do, in my opinion, he's decided he needs to get results rather than playing pretty football. You know, we see it. We saw it against Copenhagen. We saw it against Sheffield, and what was the other game? Brentford as well. I feel like he's started to maybe use players which he thinks can give him something out of nothing. So that's why I think we've seen recently quite a lot of Scott McTominay in a 10, because, you know, you couldn't question McTominay a lot, but he is a goal threat. He does provide goals, and he's done that for the past few weeks. It's why he loves Marcus Rashford so much, because he gives you a goal out of nowhere. It's why he likes Bruno Fernandes, because, again, he creates you something out of nothing. But it feels like Ten Hag, I think he's under pressure. I think he's really under pressure for his job. And I think, like I said, he's got himself in a really negative cycle now of we have to get points. If I don't get points on the board, I'm going to lose my job. So he plays players like Scott McTominay, who may not be great for a system, but are going to give you a goal here and there, nick you a 1-0 win, a 2-1 win, like we've seen recently. The problem whilst doing that, though, is that he's not building anything. We're not seeing any sort of identity to the team. This is a real step backwards from last season. United have gone down 2 or 3 levels from what they were doing last year, and it wasn't perfect last year. But I've taken a step backwards to try and guarantee results. But it's coming, you know, you're sacrificing any sort of long-term plan. You can't tell me the identity of this United side right now. You can't tell me what the game plan is. What's the identity of this team? What's the philosophy? How do United want to play? What's the type of player we want in our side? You can't point it out to me with any certainty. And that's a problem. Because then when you start to lose games as well, you know, I don't know about you guys, but for me personally, I would rather Ten Hag right now, you know, we're horrendous at the moment, to just get out of the rut. I would rather he picks a way he wants to play. If it's that Ajax football, I don't care what type of football it is, but I would rather he just picks a way of playing and sticks with it. We might lose the next 3 games, but we're not exactly what we've got to lose, basically, at this point. So I think he needs to just pick a style that he wants to play and go for it, rather than constantly reaching for that short-term, let's nick 3 points here, nick 3 points there, nick a draw there against a good side. He needs to abandon that. He needs to decide the way he wants his side to play and just stick with it. Play the profiles which suit it, not those which are going to give you moments. Play players which are going to suit the style of football that you want this football club to play. Because enough of, okay, we need to start McTominay because he might nick us a goal against Sheffield United. You're Manchester United. That's not the way that you approach games. He's tinkering too much to adapt to the opposition. You have to do it to an extent. But again, not against Copenhagen. You don't need dramatic changes to deal with Copenhagen. You don't need it against Sheffield United. You don't need it against Brentford. Not in a drastic sense. Not completely changing style on a game-to-game basis. He needs to pick a style, kind of weather the storm a little bit, but just pick an approach and stick with it, because this half approach where you're doing some things in this game, other things in that game, maybe nicking goals, other games getting battered 3-0, there is no progression from United at the start of the season. It's the same mistakes week in, week out. So that's my little point on it at the end. But again, in terms of this game, I am finished for this video. This was really concerning. This is actually up there with the lowest I felt about the club in several years, because we've got a good manager in place. And that's the concern. In the past, I felt like we haven't had the right manager. I feel that Erik ten Hag can be the right manager. But when even he cannot get this team to play in the right way, I do have my concerns. But let me know what you think in the comments down below. What went so drastically wrong? Which players need to be dropped from this starting 11 and rotated? Get them out of the team. Let me know what you think. Yeah, apart from that, thank you guys for watching. I hope you have enjoyed the video. I dare say you didn't enjoy the match, but hopefully the video has given you a bit of clarity on what really went wrong. But apart from that, thank you for watching. I hope you have enjoyed it. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.